Today we're going to discuss films that all have something in common. First of all, they're all about the tension between the past and the future. Secondly, they're all about the conflict between tradition and progress. And thirdly, they're all spoken in Yiddish. This is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. This is my closet full of all the stuff that I love. And today we explore the world of the rarely seen Yiddish cinema. Yes, that's a thing. Now, you may begin by asking, wait a minute, Mr. Kazdoy Closet, what is Yiddish? Good question. It's a language composed mainly of Slavic and German and Hebrew words and phrases. I always considered it a little more colloquial and less formal than Hebrew, which could be quite formal. Now you might also ask, well, what is Yiddish cinema then? Yiddish cinema is composed of about 100 films, shot mainly in Poland, Russia, and the US between the years of 1930 and 1950. The films were intended for Jewish audiences who were living in Eastern Europe or who had just come from Eastern Europe. They could include musicals, melodramas, supernatural stories, comedies, soap operas, even literary adaptations. The Blu-ray set that I'm going to be referring to is called The Jewish Soul, 10 Classics of Yiddish Cinema. This is on the Kino label, and it has a few commentaries on here, and then a booklet, which is quite good. It's a 5-disc set. I'm not going to talk about all 10 films in here, so don't be too scared. I'm only going to talk about the first 5, which are supposed to be the best ones, actually. Now, you're not going to see pristine video or hear pristine audio because these are old films, and sometimes they were reconstructed from pretty bad elements. So my impression is that this is the best possible version you're going to get of these films. It also has some black bars sometimes you'll see at the bottom because there were originally Hebrew subtitles and they blacked those out, and now they have English subtitles in there instead. The first film in this set I want to talk about is probably the most famous Yiddish film ever made. It's called The Dybbuk. It's from 1937, made in Poland. It's about 123 minutes. It's in black and white. All the films in this set are in black and white. You can tell it's been given prominent notice here on the cover featuring the Dybbuk, and even this picture represents the film because it is the most famous and probably the most accomplished Yiddish film that was made. It's about these two guys who are best friends. Both their wives are pregnant, and they vow that when their kids are born, they're going to marry each other. So unfortunately, one guy dies at sea. Another guy's wife dies while she's giving birth. So there's a boy and a girl that are born, and the vow is kind of forgotten. But these two meet each other, and they're somehow really super attracted to each other. So the thing their fathers wanted kind of carries over. The bad part is the girl has to marry somebody else. It's an arranged marriage. A matchmaker comes in, something that happens in a lot of these films. And the boy is so grief-stricken that she's getting married that he dies from grief, basically, and he becomes a Dybbuk, which is a 17th century figure who, sort of this ghostly figure who inhabits the souls of living people, and he actually possesses the soul of this girl that he wanted to marry. So it's kind of basically a ghost story. It's a little bit stagey. It did begin as a stage, but there's also sections of it that are quite effective and quite atmospheric. The sound effects are kind of odd. Sometimes some are missing. Sometimes you can tell they were kind of added in later. The acting can be a little bit exaggerated. And then characters often break into songs, which is something that happens a lot in these films. And in this case, the song is usually about fate or suffering, sometimes about happiness. This one took about 4 months of painstaking restoration work, frame by frame, in order to get it delivered to you on this disc. The second film on this set is totally different. It's called Mir Kumen On, or Children Must Laugh, 1935, released in Poland. It's about 61 minutes long. And this is another example of where the sort of the story behind the film is more interesting than the film itself. It's basically a documentary showing life at a sanatorium for children who had tuberculosis. The censors in Poland banned this film once they saw what it was, saying that it was commie propaganda. And so the film had to be smuggled out of Poland, and then later on there was a international search to find the different fragments of this film. So it's about a social experiment, kind of like a kibbutz, where children are farming, they're singing, they're working together, they're putting on skits, and they're even raising animals, and they're also having council meetings where they each have an equal voice, and they also decide how to help other kids that are not in the sanatorium and bring them over and help them from suffering. The children are given food, shelter, dental, and medical. And after about 1 to 2 months, the kids are happy and they're healthy. Now here's the kicker, is in 1942, the Nazis invaded. They arrested all the kids, all the adult staff in the sanatorium, sent them all to Treblinka, the infamous concentration camp. So it really adds a great deal of poignancy and sorrow when you watch the film and you see these kids who are very young, and they're all laughing, and they're singing and dancing and having a really good time, and they're happy and healthy, and you know what their tragic fate is going to be in just a short amount of time. The film, like I said, is mostly documentary. There are some parts that are scripted where the kids are saying lines just to have sort of a dramatic narrative to it. It's really intended as a promotional piece at the time to obtain more funding for the sanatorium, which was quite successful. The third film on the set, again, a real departure from the previous one. It's called American Matchmaker. It's from 1940. It's only 85 minutes, made in the US. The rest of the films in the set, and the ones I'm going to be talking about, were all made in the US. And if you watch the series Stitzel on Netflix, I'll mention that again later, you know that matchmaking is a regular theme of Jewish-themed films and plays, and this one is no exception. It was shot in New York. The director was Edgar G. Ulmer, who went on to make the horror classic The Black Cat and the film noir classic Detour. It's about a man who's been engaged 7 times, and something always happens, kind of comically, to interfere with him getting married. So finally he says, this is my fate. I'm never going to get married. Instead, I'm going to help other people. I'm going to become a matchmaker. And you can probably see where this is going. One of his clients is a woman, and they fall in love with each other and end up getting married. So that's kind of obvious. Again, we have characters breaking into song. We have some characters even occasionally break into English while they're speaking, which is kind of interesting. And I also notice a lot of these films have at least one character who is sort of a silly character, and he's the comic relief. The fourth film in this set is called Overture to Glory. Talk about a boring title. Would you ever find yourself saying, hey, let's go see Overture to Glory tonight? It's from 1940, 82 minutes long, and this was the toughest one for me to get through because there's so much singing from a cantor in this film. It's about 2/3 of the film is him singing. Now, a cantor, in case you don't know, he's the person at the synagogue who sings in a very loud voice the prayers. The actor named Moshe Oisher, he plays the cantor, and he was actually a cantor in real life. And in the film, he's so great that people from the secular world come to see him, and they want to put him in an opera. Well, of course, here's the theme of religious tradition and following your heart, because he really wants to do this. He's really drawn to classical music and opera, but everybody at home, including his family, no, you can't do that. It's terrible. They think he's making the wrong move, but his heart is drawn to opera and classical. And so that's what he does, but then something tragic happens, and he has to return at the end to the synagogue, and he sings one last emotional song and then dies. So it's very moralist. It's like, see what happens if you follow your heart and you follow your dreams and turn your back on tradition and the family, you're going to have a terrible ending. So there's that theme of guilt and the theme of suffering and of sacrifice that appears in so many of these films. The problem with the songs is really not my taste. They're not very melodic. It's almost like wailing. And the lyrics are also mainly about how God is so great and how man is so unworthy of God. So, but this film did have a bigger budget, and it's more sophisticated looking cinematically, and it even has a larger cast. The fifth film that I watched is called Tevye, or Tevye the Milkman. It's from 1939, and it's 92 minutes long. It's based on a book by Shalom Aleichem, who was like the grandfather of Yiddish literature, and his book was later turned into a play and a film called, you may have heard of it, Fiddler on the Roof. I've never seen Fiddler on the Roof, though I do know several of the songs, so I guess that's to its credit. Maurice Schwartz stars as Tevye. He directed the film and he wrote the screenplay. He's actually quite good. Now, Tevye is a poor farmer. His daughter is in love with a Gentile, and that is not acceptable, so she keeps it a secret from her family. At one point, Tevye tells his daughter, you know, you're hanging around a lot of Gentiles, but if there's ever another pogrom, which is when they come and massacre all the Jews in the area, all your Gentile friends, they're going to turn on you in an instant. And that whole idea of who can you trust and being on guard is something that I grew up with too. So she does end up marrying this Gentile man, and Tevye freaks out, tells his wife, our daughter is dead. In fact, she never even existed. So they totally disown her, and they do not want to see her, and that's the way it goes. In the end, though, the daughter leaves her husband, comes back home, tells her father, we just come from two different worlds. So again, that whole idea of mixing into the other world is not acceptable. And she reunites with her dad just in time for the Tsar to show up and evict Tevye and all the other Jews from the village. And Tevye even again reinforces the fact that all my good friends told me I had to leave. So again, that whole idea of who can you trust and watch out for the other person. The irony, of course, is nowadays 50% of Jews marry non-Jews. So this set, The Jewish Soul, 10 Classics of Yiddish Cinema, it's a very interesting peek into a genre or a type of film that I was unaware of and that is really rarely seen. I think a lot of this is a historical interest, or if you're a student of film or a student of Judaism, there's a lot of thematic coherence here, but that the themes can be very stifling, very oppressive. So sometimes it gets a little exhausting watching all of these. So I'll get around to the other films, the other 5 films at some point, but not right now. Meanwhile, how can you see these? Well, it's going to be pretty tough unless you want to buy this set. The good news is it's on sale right now for $17.99 at Kino, and that's through October 26, 2021. The regular price is $50. I think Amazon has it for about $28 or so. But still, remember, you're getting 5 discs, 10 films for that money, and a nice booklet with some background information. Or if you're just curious about the world of Orthodox Jews and the themes that I talked about here of suffering and guilt and how to hold on to your traditions in a modern world, I do recommend, like I said before, the series Stitzel on Netflix. Meanwhile, hope you like this episode. Feel free to leave a comment down here. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. Share this with all your friends and neighbors. Otherwise, I thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.